Millions of cat owners open a can of wet food every single day without realizing what it's actually triggering inside their cat's body. And a few of those effects will genuinely surprise you. Most people frame the wet versus dry decision as a matter of preference, a texture thing, a spoiling thing. But what's actually unfolding inside your cat's system when wet food becomes a daily staple goes far deeper than anyone takes the time to explain. It affects organ function. It reshapes body composition over time. It quietly rewires the way your cat behaves around mealtimes. And the very last point we'll cover carries a hidden downside that turns the whole thing sideways if you're not handling it correctly. Let's go through it from the beginning. 1. Their body finally gets proper hydration. Here's what surprises most cat owners when they first hear it. Your cat's apparent disinterest in their water bowl isn't stubbornness. It isn't preference. It's ancient wiring. Cats evolved from desert-adapted hunters. Their wild ancestors absorbed nearly all their liquid intake directly from prey, not from standing water on the side. Over millennia, that dependency never developed. Their thirst drive stayed weak because their biology didn't require it. That worked flawlessly in the wild. In a modern kitchen paired with dry kibble, it creates a persistent hydration deficit. Dry food contains roughly 10% moisture. Wet food sits between 75 and 80%, essentially matching the water content of a small bird or rodent, which is exactly what feline biology was calibrated for. The moment you shift to daily wet food, while your hydration levels move meaningfully, kidneys stop compensating for chronic shortfall. Urine becomes more dilute, which significantly reduces the formation of crystals and urinary blockages, among the most painful and common emergencies vets see in cats, particularly males. Research from the Journal of Feline Medicine and Surgery established that cats on wet food diets produce notably higher urine volume at lower concentration, the precise profile associated with a healthy urinary tract. Your cat may not suddenly drink less from their bowl, but their body stops running on a quiet deficit, and that shift is the foundation that makes every other benefit on this list possible. Stay until the final point, because there's a way this can silently backfire that most owners never anticipate. 2. Body weight rebalances on its own. Why does a cat gain weight when their owner isn't even overfeeding them? This is one of the more quietly frustrating situations in cat care, and the answer isn't hidden in portion size. It's sitting inside the ingredient ratios. Dry kibble is dense with carbohydrates. Some commercial formulas reach 40% or beyond. For an obligate carnivore, an animal whose entire metabolic system evolved around animal protein and fat, that ratio is a fundamental mismatch. Cats have virtually no efficient biological pathway for converting carbohydrates into usable energy. What doesn't get burned gets stored. This isn't a willpower problem, it's a food design problem. The problem isn't your cat, it's what they've been eating. Wet food reconfigures that equation. Higher protein content, substantially lower carbohydrate load. The moisture volume adds physical bulk to each meal without meaningfully increasing caloric density. The combined effect is that your cat actually reaches a genuine satiety signal, the biological cue that says done, rather than clearing the bowl and returning to the kitchen an hour later still unsatisfied. Research from the Waltham Centre for Pet Nutrition found that cats given wet food consistently maintained leaner body composition than those on dry diets, even when food was freely accessible. Protein produces a stronger and longer-lasting fullness response than carbohydrates do. That's physiology. If weight has been a persistent issue and reducing portion sizes hasn't changed anything, the problem might not be how much they're eating. 3. The coat starts reflecting what's happening inside. You can read a meaningful amount of a cat's internal health through the texture of their coat. Dense, soft, lustrous fur signals something functioning well beneath the surface. Dull, brittle or flaky coat signals the opposite, and it usually shows before anything else does. Most owners assume this is a grooming issue, more brushing, a better shampoo, an omega supplement. But coat quality is one of the most direct external expressions of nutritional status. When the diet is off, the coat reports it reliably. Wet food provides something that heavily processed dry food consistently fails to deliver: animal-based proteins and fats in a form that hasn't been degraded by extreme heat manufacturing. The high-temperature processing required to produce kibble destroys a significant portion of nutrients before the food ever reaches your cat. When daily wet food enters the routine, most owners begin noticing the coat change within a few weeks. Fur softens, shedding decreases noticeably. That rough, dusty texture that certain cats carry year-round begins to fade. A study in the Journal of Nutritional Science documented measurable improvements in both coat quality and skin condition in cats eating high-protein, moisture-rich diets compared to dry-fed counterparts. The body stops rationing resources for survival and starts directing them where they belong. If you've already cycled through every supplement and grooming product without results, the fix might already be in the wet food aisle. 4. Mealtime behavior completely changes. Does your cat begin announcing mealtime before you've taken a single step toward the kitchen? Do they eat so fast it almost looks aggressive? Most owners label this personality, but there's often something much more functional happening underneath it. Cats eating dry food frequently get trapped in a cycle of incomplete satisfaction. Kibble's low moisture content and high carbohydrate ratio digest faster than the cat's brain fully registers fullness. Within a few hours, the hunger signal returns, the pacing resumes, the bowl-side howling starts again. The 4 a.m. wake-up visits become routine. A cat who feels genuinely full doesn't search for more. When wet food becomes the daily norm, that cycle begins to break. Higher protein content triggers a real and lasting satiety response. The moisture adds physical volume that stretches the stomach enough to activate the mechanical fullness mechanisms. Research published in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior confirmed that cats on high-protein diets showed meaningfully less food-seeking behavior and reduced intermeal frustration. To be fair about it, not every frantic eater is reacting purely to food composition. In multi-cat homes, or in cats that came from early environments marked by food insecurity, rapid eating can become deeply habitual regardless of what's in the bowl. In those situations, wet food helps, but pairing it with a puzzle feeder addresses the behavioral layer simultaneously. It forces a slower pace and engages the cat's instinct to work for food, which is exactly how their brain was built to experience mealtimes. When both elements work together, the shift is unmistakable. Mealtime stops feeling like a competition. The guarding drops away. The desperation fades. Susky your cat eats, walks off and settles. 5. The risk that quietly undoes all of it. Here's the catch I referenced at the start. Wet food delivers everything we've described, but only when handled correctly after the can is open. Dry kibble is engineered to sit in a bowl all day. Wet food is not. The moment it meets air at room temperature, bacterial activity begins. Depending on how warm your space runs, the safe exposure window can close in as little as 60 to 90 minutes. For cats that graze in increments, taking a few bites, wandering away, returning an hour or two later, that second visit may no longer be safe. The visual check is unreliable. The food will look fine. It may smell normal to you. Bacterial growth doesn't announce itself. The rule to adopt is straightforward. After 2 hours at room temperature, discard what's left. Any unused portion from an open can should be covered and refrigerated immediately and finished within 48 hours. One final detail worth knowing. Don't serve wet food cold directly from the refrigerator. Cats are drawn toward food at near body temperature because it resembles fresh prey. A brief stint in the microwave, or a tablespoon of warm water mixed in, brings it to the right range, and noticeably increases appeal for cats who've been reluctant about wet food in the first place. None of this changes what we covered. Hydration, body weight, coat quality, calmer behavior around feeding, all of it still holds. But the full benefit of daily wet food depends entirely on what you do after the can is opened. Get that part right and you're feeding your cat the way their body was designed to eat. If this gave you a different way to think about what's in your cat's bowl, hit like and subscribe to Pawsychology. New cat behavior and nutrition videos every week. Real information, zero filler.